What's up everyone, Lily here. Welcome back to my channel. Today, let's talk about speaking part 2 cue cards. I will share with you 3 tips that guarantee you can speak non-stop for 2 minutes straight. The first tip, which is also the most important tip, is to organize your answer into a timeline. Let me use this cue card to explain. It asks us to describe an important decision that we made. Usually say what the decision was, how you made your decision, what the results of the decision were, and explain why the decision was important. One very important thing you should know is that you don't have to talk about these 4 prompts. You can, but you don't have to. I personally wouldn't spend time reading the 4 prompts at all. What I would do is first read the topic, so I know I need to describe an important decision I made. And then I would ignore the 4 prompts and go ahead and plan what I would say for each phase of the timeline. My timeline normally has 3 phases: the past, the now, and the future. Let's say I want to talk about my decision to quit my old job. So after I introduce the topic, after I tell the examiner, today I want to share with you my story of how I finally had the courage to quit my old job. So after this, I wouldn't just start talking about how I made my decision. In order to easily speak for 2 minutes, I would start with the past. I would start with the time before I even made my decision to quit. I would talk about, for example, what I did for a living in the past. I was teaching at a local language school. Why I hated it. The job was so repetitive. I was teaching the same old stuff over and over. It just didn't align with my passion for doing something more creative and exciting. I could also talk about why I stayed in that boring job for such a long period of time. I stayed in that job because I was so afraid of other people's judgment. What would my friends think if I didn't have a steady job? You guys can pause the video and read the script. I've already talked for around 40 seconds even before I mentioned the decision to quit. Of course, now I need to explain how I made the decision to quit. So I made that decision all because I watched some motivational videos. Those videos made me realize that I need to stop living for others and start living for myself. You can pause the video and read the script. You may think, oh, I can't develop my answer as fully as you do. Even if I talk about the past, I still won't be able to speak for 2 minutes. I understand, don't worry. I will show you 2 other tips to help you make your answer more detailed and longer, but let's finish our timeline first. So I've finished talking about the past. What about now? What am I doing right now? Now I work as a content creator. I make YouTube videos. I love doing it because it allows me to try different ideas. I'm happier than ever. What about the future? I think I've already talked enough, so I don't need to discuss the future in great detail to reach the 2-minute mark. I will just say, looking ahead, I'm feeling more confident about making big changes in my life. I may even consider moving to another country, who knows? Now, we've finished the entire timeline. It isn't only about coming up with enough content to say, it's also about fluency and coherence. When you know exactly what you will be talking about, the past, the present, and the future, you will speak more fluently instead of Organizing your answer into a timeline also makes the answer more coherent. You just use phrases like now, looking ahead, or in the future to transition from one phase of the timeline to the next. But what if we still can't hit the 2-minute mark even after talking about the entire timeline? This brings us to the next tip, which is discussing the bigger impacts or the lessons learned. I think we can always talk about the bigger impacts no matter what topic we get, but sometimes the future and the bigger impacts may sound repetitive. For example, here for the bigger impacts or lessons learned, I can say something like, this experience taught me not to be afraid to switch directions in my life. I've learned to embrace change and try new things while staying true to myself. The least important thing I should care about is other people's judgments. As you can see, the future is also about the lessons learned. Sometimes these 2 parts sound repetitive, sometimes they don't. If you find these 2 parts repetitive, you can choose only one to talk about. So what I would do during the 1 minute they gave us to think about what we are going to say is first, read the topic, and then think about what I can say about the past and the present. And then decide if I want to talk about the future, the lessons learned, or both. Now, I'm going to give you a backup tip just to make sure you truly have enough ideas to talk for 2 minutes straight. So, after I've planned out what I would say about the past, the present, the future, and the lessons learned, if the 1 minute hasn't run out, I will think of where I can add an example. For example, here I mentioned the impact thousands of people. I think I can give an example of how my videos have made a positive impact on other people's lives. For example, I can say that a lot of viewers have told me that they passed the exam by watching my free YouTube videos without buying any paid courses. Isn't that amazing? The example is only one sentence, but it takes me around 10 seconds to say it. Here are all 3 strategies I used to answer this question. The first one, organizing your answer into a timeline is the key. I think as long as you are creative, you can always come up with a timeline, no matter what topic you get. Remember, the key is to be creative. For example, this cue card asks us to describe something we would like to learn in the future. At first glance, it seems impossible to talk about the past because it asks us to describe something in the future. That's why you need to be creative. Now I'm going to show you how I would plan my timeline. As I mentioned in the last example, I wouldn't read the 4 prompts. Reading the prompts actually sometimes limits my imagination. After I read the topic describe something you would like to learn in the future, I would go ahead and think about what I would say about the past and the present. Let's say I want to learn coding in the future. I wouldn't just go ahead and talk about how I would like to learn it in the future. In order to easily speak for 2 minutes, I would start with the past. I would talk about why I didn't learn it in the past. The reason is that my parents were poor. They couldn't afford coding classes. Here's the script. You guys can pause the video to read it. I first introduced the topic and then explained why I want to learn to code. And then I started with the past and talked about why I didn't learn it in the past. Next, I'm going to talk about the present. Why am I still not learning it? I'm still not learning coding because I'm too busy with work. Here in China, we have this crazy work culture called 996, where people work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. I'm totally burned out after work. I don't have time to learn to code. As you can see, I've already talked for around 50 seconds, even before I start to talk about the future. Feel free to pause the video to read the script. Now, let's move on to the future. How can I have time to learn coding in the future? I hope one day I can quit my day job and start my own business so that I can have time for my hobbies. How am I going to learn it? I can learn it with ChatGPT. I can also join online forums to connect with other coding lovers. We can also add the lessons learned if the examiner hasn't said stop. The big lesson learned here is that if you want to learn something, do it while you are young because as you grow older, work and family stuff take over. You won't have much time for personal hobbies. And don't forget that we have a backup tip. When you plan your answer, if you feel you may be unable to reach the 2-minute mark, you can think of examples. For example, at the very beginning, when explaining why I love coding, I can add examples of how people like Mark Zuckerberg have inspired me. Like, I'm always thrilled to hear stories of tech company founders like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk coding their first products in college dorm rooms or parents' basements. Their stories remind me that all it takes is a laptop, passion, and a dream to code something that could change the world. Here's the entire script. My answer tells a timeline, contains an example, and talks about the lessons learned. Now, do you find it's easier to speak for 2 minutes? Again, the key is to have a timeline. The other 2 tips are backups. Now, I have an assignment for you. Can you use a timeline to describe a popular person? Can you try to start with the past? Pause the video and try it yourself first, and then listen to my timeline. Alright, let's say I want to talk about Taylor Swift. I wouldn't just go ahead and talk about why I like her or why she is popular now. In order to speak for 2 minutes, I would start with the past. Why wasn't I a big fan of her in the past? See, as long as you are creative, you can always come up with something to say about the past. So I didn't like her in the past for 2 reasons. 1, her music was mainly country music, which wasn't my thing at all. 2, she wrote meaningful lyrics, but I was too young to understand them. What about now? Why do I like her now? Her music has become so diverse, she's no longer only a country music singer. Also, I've grown older and gained more life experience. I have started to understand the deep meaning behind her lyrics. And I think this is the perfect place to add an example. I can talk about the specific song she wrote and how it resonates with me. I can say something like, let me give you a perfect example. In the music video of the man, when the dad spends time with the kid, people are like, wow, what a great dad. But in real life, if a mom does the same, it's no big deal. It's like we are held to different standards just because we are women. What about the future? Taylor will be touring in Asia with her Era tour. Hopefully, I can be there and sing with her. If the examiner doesn't say stop, I can continue to talk about the bigger impacts. What does her music teach us? How does this impact our lives? It gives us courage to face tough times, embrace our true selves, and grow through all the messy stuff life throws at us. Here is the entire script. How do you think of these 3 tips? Do they make cue cards easier for you to answer? The first tip, telling a timeline, really saved my life in extra exams. When I knew I had enough ideas to talk for 2 minutes, I didn't panic and was able to speak more fluently. If you find these tips not very easy to use, please practice using them for a while. They really work, and that's it for this video. If you found this helpful, please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon.